Hello and welcome to episode 53 of the Climate Skeptic podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Hodges. Now, we are constantly told that net zero is essential, but much less attention is paid to what it's actually costing, who's paying the bill, or whether the UK's energy system is becoming more secure as a result. Well, Richard Lyon believes it's time to lift the lid. He's an energy analyst, petroleum engineer, and author of The Energy Trap. He's also created the Subsidy Clock, which he says shows British households have already been committed to more than 227 billion in renewable energy subsidies. He joins me now to explain where that figure comes from, why he believes that Britain's energy policy is fundamentally flawed, and what he'd do differently. Welcome, Richard.
Hello, Ellie.
Now, Richard, your subsidy clock really pulls back the curtain on just how much all these renewables have cost us. Over £200 billion and counting, a truly staggering number. Do you think the government keeps these numbers scattered and hard to add up because they don't want us asking if it's all really worth it, especially when the climate panic seems overblown?
Well, Ellie, thanks for having me on. It's a bit worse than that. It's actually, I looked just before I came on, it's 227 billion. It's Tuesday. By Thursday morning, it'll be 228 billion. Are they concealing it from us? I tend not to subscribe to conspiracy theory. Hanlon's razor says that you should never ascribe to malice what can be perfectly described by incompetence. And I think much of what we see here is an example of that. I think the real story is it's no one's job to tot up these numbers. In the case of our money arrangements, we have the Office for Budget Responsibility, and they will every year and audit what the government says it will spend and what it actually spent. It'll tot up the differences, tell us about those differences, and hold the government accountable. But there is no equivalent of that for our energy arrangement, which is ironic when you realise that our money arrangements are only possible because of our energy arrangements. So it's scattered. I mean, the job of digging into the various places where the government reports all of the things that add up to 227 billion today is laborious, but they are all there. It's not that they're being hidden. I didn't need any freedom of information requests to get them, but they're not easily accessible. And that's why one of the things we're trying to do is establish the equivalent of the Office of Budget Responsibility, the Office of Energy Responsibility, if you like, the National Energy Audit. And until the government will audit its energy arrangements, my proposal is that a panel of citizens who are suitably qualified audit the government's energy arrangements on an annual basis and report against them transparently. What did they plan to do? What can we do in physical units? How much does it cost to do that? Where are the gaps? Where are the hiddens? And it's called the National Energy Audit, and it's online if any of your listeners would like to see it. And we are recruiting for panelists. If you would like to join it, then please apply.
So you've built this really useful trio of sites: the Subsidy Clock for costs, goodmargin.co.uk for how much power we actually control right now, and gridsim.co.uk for testing the grid against real weather history. What's the thinking behind them, and why did you decide to create this three-legged stool to help people understand what's really going on with UK energy?
Well, Ellie, it emerges really from, in my book, The Energy Trap, at the end of it, I propose a 7-stage blueprint for how we can remedy the problems that we have in our energy system and what we can do about it. And one of them is to make transparent our arrangements. And the reason I think that's really important is I don't think that the predicament we are in is going to be solved by hoping that the great and the good talk amongst themselves, realize the errors of the ways, and come to a recognition about the proper way of going about it. I've never come across a subject that is so firmly in the grip of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where those people who are least knowledgeable in a subject are most confident of its outcome. So in order to get under the surface of this, I think it is necessary for the public to become aware of the costs and the risks and the dynamics of the energy system that their lives literally depend on, particularly here in Britain at the 60th parallel, where 26,000 people a year in the winter die more than in the summer because it's a cold place. So I created 3 tools, all easily digestible for the public to use. The Subsidy Clock, exposes the cost of the subsidies, 227 to date. Grid margin just shows you on a half-hourly basis where the energy is coming from that powers your local hospital and the intensive care unit that you depend on. So in other words, if the wind drops this afternoon, how exposed are you to the consequence of that? All of our online reportings tend to be focused on the carbon content and whether it's this solar and that wind. This one just says, how vulnerable are you? And the third one is called GridSim. It's a little more complex, but it allows you to play with the UK energy grid. It takes 40 years of weather, half-hour intervals, and lets you configure the UK grid with different amounts of wind, different amounts of sun, different amounts of hydrogen, different amounts of generation, play it over 40 years and just watch it crash and understand why it crashes. And those three together, I hope, will form tools that we talk about day to day. When somebody says to you, oh, look how cheap renewable energy is, well, you can show them that actually today it's costing your household about £700 a year on your energy bills, on your taxation, on the increase of cost of things that you buy because the company selling you have got to cover their energy costs. That, wholesale energy is £75 a megawatt hour. That's relatively cheap. But we pay another 75 megawatt hours on top of that in subsidies. And now people have the tools to talk about those things to themselves, with each other, to family members, to their local MPs, and just so that we can get this informed debate about why this net zero proposal just doesn't work and why it's so ruinously expensive.
In your book, The Energy Trap, you lay out why this renewable transition just isn't going to work the way that people hope. So what exactly is the trap that we've fallen into?
Well, there's a long version which is in the book. The short version starts actually with a fairly startling proposition. I should say my background is 25, 30 years in the oil and gas industry. I'm an international oil and gas manager, petroleum engineer. So I say with some authority that the precariousness of our oil and gas system is greater than most people realize. There is a sense abroad that the peak oil proposition, that oil would peak and then collapse, was proven untrue and that everything's fine. That is not the case at all. What we did after the 2008 global financial crash was print about £200 trillion worldwide of fake money. And one of the purposes that we put that to was to mobilize uneconomic oil. And that's what sustained the global economy for the last 15 years. That process is coming to an end and fairly soon. And at that point, our energy system will start to go into decline. That matters. Every single energy transition in recorded human history, there have been many. All of them have got two things that have been true. As we've gone from agriculture to wood to gas to oil to nuclear. And the successful ones, two things have been true all the time. First is that we've always had plenty of the current fuel supply in hand. When we moved from wood to coal, there was still plenty of forests to chop down. And the second thing was that the thing we're moving to was a better quality energy source. And that matters. We tend, particularly the people running our energy policies, tend to think only of energy in terms of quantity. How much energy do we have? They don't distinguish between different qualities of energy. And energy has qualities defined by its concentration, its ability, or its gradient rather, its ability to do work. There's the same amount of energy in a large swimming pool as an egg boiling pan, but you could do far more work with a pan of boiling water than a swimming pool. That's its gradient. The energy density, the areal power density, these are properties of energy that vary and distinguish between the different types. And all successful transitions in history have gone up the quality ladder. This is the first time anyone has just tried to go down the transition ladder to lower quality energy sources. There are plenty of examples in history when it's been done involuntarily. And what is noticeable about them is every single one of them is associated with a mass casualty event. Why? Because whenever you're transitioning your energy system, two things have to be true at that time. One is you've got enough energy to build the new system. When we move from, coal to gas, building a gas network required a huge amount of energy. And also, you've got to keep everyone alive. There's 4.5 billion people on the planet today, of the 9 billion, who depend every day on fuel derived from hydrocarbon. gas to fertilizer, fertilizer to carbohydrate and protein. We've got to keep them alive. And so two things come together. One is we need huge amounts of hydrocarbon to do whatever transition comes next. And we have to do it in a way that keeps everyone alive while we're doing it. And this insidious thing about the net zero agenda is it appears to work for a while. For a while, we can squander the remaining reserves of our hydrocarbon on gadgets and doodads, wind turbines and solar panels that will be in landfill in 25 years' time. We can fund the whole thing by printing gargantuan amounts of monopoly money. And it will work until it stops working. And then suddenly we will hit an energy cliff. Suddenly the interest payments on the debt will come due. Suddenly we won't be able to maintain the arrangements. And then we will be stuck because there will be no discretionary quantity of hydrocarbon left at that point to do something productive with it. That's why it's a trap.
You're always very careful to say that you're not a climate skeptic. Why actually is that? And where do you stand on the climate debate, just more generally?
Well, it's a good question. And my answer is it doesn't matter. You can grant the climate catastrophe narrative its full due, and it will not make the slightest bit of difference to our energy system. Why? Because the only things that matter when you're designing an energy system, there are two things that matter. First thing is it consistent with the laws of physics? And the second thing is, can you build it with current and near-term technology? Those are the only two things that matter. And those things don't change, even if you want something very different. It doesn't matter how much you wish the weather was different. Wishing the weather was different doesn't alter the constraints of physics and doesn't alter the available technology. Now, if it were the case that within the constraints of physics and with the technology available to us, we could generate an option of energy systems, a suite of energy systems, then it might be possible to